It is good to see you all. Welcome back, Cindy. Is it? And it's good to see some old faces, not brand new, but been here before. Good to see you. And good to meet you. Couple of announcements for you. Next week is our week of prayer. Thank you. At least one person is excited. It's next week. A week starts today. Today is the beginning of a week. It is not this week. It is next week. Next week, Monday. I'm not saying tomorrow. It starts next week, Monday, the 20th. From the 20th to the 24th. We are meeting here every evening at 7:30 p.m. We'll go until 9 p.m. to pray together. Don't leave your praying to just that slot. You can pray in the lead up to the week, and let us believe God for some answers, for clear strategies for the year, and for Him to do what He wants to do amongst us. So let us all come together. That week there won't be a morning prayer meeting. It will just be evening. Everybody come along. If you can't get here by 7:30, get here when you can. It's about us coming together. Don't miss some days unless you absolutely cannot make it. But if don't pick and choose. It's not a pick and mix. We do the whole week. We're doing the whole week together, everybody coming, 7:30 every night for the whole week, from the 20th to the 24th. Okay? And Dave has an announcement.
Yeah, our both won. Anyway, I'm going to announce a seminar that's here on the 1st of February. It's a day seminar from 9:15 to 4:30. It's organised by Transformation Thurrock. Most of you, if you have never heard of them, they're a network of individuals from churches across Thurrock. They've been going quite a while. We've had a lot to do with them before, but they're using this building. But this is going to be special. This is going to be a real opportunity to get together with other Christians from other churches in Thurrock, and it's going to be really good. The theme is wholehearted living, and it's what is wholehearted living? What do wholehearted people have in common? What have they learnt to let go of and leave behind? What healthy habits do they practice and develop? And it doesn't announce the speaker, but we know from other sources that the speaker is a charismatic Anglican who's very much linked with Ebbsfleet Church across over in Kent, and he's very, very, very good. So this is going to be great. And I was just thinking, we're not the organisers, so if I was one of the people who do a lot of catering here for these events in our church, I'd come along just to be able to sit back and just receive and not have to do anything, but just to minister, get fed by the word, because so often we miss, those who do miss so much. But it will be great, and it's going to be really good. It's £10 for the day, and it tells you to look at their website. I'll leave that over there, but if anybody does need information, there are quite a few people who would know how to help you if you need more details.
Morning, everyone. What I need to really sort of emphasize, it's about a prayer week. I would like to encourage every one of us to be here. There is power in unity. There is power. So don't miss this prayer week. Just tell yourself that this week, the 20th, I'm going to be here. I'm going to partake in prayer. You know, King Joseph had called for a prayer and a fast. A king called for that because he needed things to be sorted out. And as a church, if we really say we are called of God and we want to influence, we want to reach, we want to establish, we want to encourage, we want to bring hope, you'll have to be here. You definitely have to be here. Honestly, guys. The Bible says 1 put 1,000, 2 puts what? So how many are we today here? So can you imagine how much crippling will we do to the enemy's camp? So don't leave it to somebody else. Don't have an excuse. Don't be cheated out of this blessing. I'm not going to say, oh, if you come here, you're going to be blessed, whatever. All I'm saying, you need to be here. We all need to be here. We need to see God turning things around. We need to see change. Change comes because you are also going to you're going to put something. You are not going to allow other people to do it on your behalf, guys. No. Tell yourself, I'm going to commit. No matter what your mind is telling you, just say, no, I'm going to be there. Honestly, guys. And it's a year of enlarging. In order for us to enlarge, there are some things that we need to do. Sacrifice and obedience. That's just being obedient. It's not Chris calling for a prayer. It is you yourself. Don't you want to see change? Don't you want to see change? So if you want to see change, be part of the change. Do something about it. So I am looking forward to see each and every one of you on the prayer week. Don't miss out. Don't. Because some of us are going through stuff. Big stuff. And those stuff can only be sorted by prayer. By just you coming to an oasis. It's a corporate prayer. Corporate things have got power. Corporate things, they move, they shift. They shift lots of things. I can do it on my own, but it will just be a fraction. But if we, all of us, move, push something, it will definitely topple over. So I am just encouraging you guys, please be here from the 20th to the 24th and see God doing something. And it's not about us, it's about other people. When you are coming for that prayer, don't say it's about me. It's about what I want to see God doing for other people. Okay, guys? Okay.
Actually, I would add to that. It's not just challenge yourself that week not to pray for yourself, but actually focus on others, focus on God's agenda. Not your own agenda, but God's agenda. Okay? And when we come together where there is unity, there God commands a blessing. There is power in unity, in being together corporately. Okay, so this morning you've got me. I wasn't looking for a clap. All right, one of the things that one of the words God gave me for us as a church for this year, those who were here on New Year's Eve would have heard me share it, was that it is time for you to occupy your space. It is time for you to occupy your space. And I just felt that God wanted me to share that today. What does it mean for you to occupy your space? It means that you move into position. You were probably not in position before, but now it's time to move into position. Find out what God's position for you is and align yourself with that position. Yeah? It means you need to be who God has made you to be. Now, it was... I was fine before. I've got water. Okay. It was for us as a church, but also for us as individuals. So as I go through this, think about what it means for you as an individual, but also what it means for us as a church. We need to be, as a church, who God has made us to be. We need to be aligned with God's purpose for us as a church. We need to move into position. We need to move into position. The phrase, it is time, or sentence, it is time for you to occupy your space. Your space. Only you can occupy that space. It is your space. It is your purpose. It is your calling. Only you can fulfill that purpose. Not somebody else. You. It is time for us to stop trying to be someone else. It is time for us to stop trying to be what other people say we ought to be. It is time for us to be exactly who God says we are. The Spirit moves amongst us. We just sang, I am who you say I am. And we need to be able to stand and boldly declare that I am who God says I am. As a person, as an individual, I am who God says I am. Not just in words, but by the way I live my life. If God says I am healed, then I am walking in total and complete healing. If God says I am blessed, then guess what? I am blessed. It doesn't matter what my bank account says. That's just the bank account. But when God says I am blessed, that's who I am. And if my circumstances don't line up with what God says I am, who God says I am, then they better fall into line. And the only way they do that is I keep declaring it, I keep believing it, I keep standing up on God's word concerning me, and I keep praying it. The week of prayer. As a church, we need to pray into being who God says we are. In that same phrase, it's time for you to occupy your space. It has the word occupy. You don't just stand in one tiny corner of that space. When God says, I have brought you into a broad and spacious land, He means for you to occupy that broad and spacious land, not just live in one tiny corner. Can you imagine somebody having a mansion with many rooms and they only live in one room? What's the point? What's the point? But as Christians, we do that. We do that a lot. When God has given us so much, we're like, you know what? I'm going to just stick to this little bit here. When God has promised us the fullness of His Spirit, we're like, oh no, I'm just going to make do with a few goosebumps on Sunday. When God has said, you will lay hands on the sick and they will recover, I'm like, oh, I'll pray for you from over here. We need to be exactly who God says we are. We need to occupy the whole space. So your space is your gifts. Your space is your sphere of influence. your space is your calling, your purpose. We need to stop living as if our lives were over. You're not dead yet. You're not dead yet. So we need to start living. Live as if you're alive. Once you're dead, you can't influence anybody. Yes, the story of your life may do, but that is only if you lived your life to influence people while you were alive. I mean, now we'll talk about Reinhard Bonnke and how he preached to so many people. If he didn't impact anybody, nobody will be talking about him. For you to have any sort of, live your life now, influencing people, impacting other people's lives for good, because you can also impact people for bad, but no, for good. Right influence on people, then when you're dead, you will still have some influence. But don't wait until you're dead to have any influence. It doesn't work that way. So occupy your space. Spread out. Use all that space. God has given you gifts. Use those gifts. Don't deprive us. Like I said, you have a purpose. If you don't fulfill your purpose, you're depriving the rest of us. Because your purpose has nothing to do with you, really. It's about other people. It is time for us to go from being babies to maturity. For us to stand up to full stature, our full stature in God. It is time for us to stop being victims of circumstances, to stop being bent over, like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. But look up. Stand up to your full stature. Don't let anyone, anything cower you. I will fear no evil. That's what we just sang. I will fear no evil. Don't let fear reduce you to a fraction of who God says you are. Don't let fear do that to you. Don't let anything do that to you, but rather stand fully knowing who you are and being who you are. Yeah? As a church, it is time for us to stop hiding behind our walls and our shutters and our plans and our programs and our this and our that, and actually start becoming who God has said we are. God has planted us here for a purpose. It is time for us to start fulfilling that purpose. Time to stop hiding. Let the world know who we are. I mean, Jesus said, you're a light, a city on a hill. He says, who lights a lamp and hides it under a bushel? No, you set it up on the mantelpiece so that it gives light to the whole room. That is why God has placed us here. We are meant to be light, not hidden. Light shining brightly, lighting up the whole room, the whole of Stanford, the whole of this area, lit up because we are here. That is who we are. It is time for us to start being that. We've been told, if you were not here last Sunday, find some way to listen to the preach. Part of what was said was, this is the year of the harvest, of bringing in the harvest. If that is true, then let us do that. We've been called to bring in the harvest. Jesus gave us that commission to bring in the harvest. Let us do that. That is who we are, harvesters. That is who we are. We are here to reach our community. Let us do that. And don't wait for somebody to say, oh, this is how we will reach our community. Let God give you his ideas for reaching our community. Then submit it to the church and be like, this is the idea God has given me. Don't wait for somebody else to come up with programs. No. Listen to God. Get his ideas. Submit it to the church. One person isn't the church. We all are the church. Can we open our Bibles to Luke 19, please? Luke 19:11. The crowd was listening to everything Jesus said, and because he was nearing Jerusalem, he told them a story to correct the impression that the kingdom of God would begin right away. He said, a nobleman was called away to a distant empire to be crowned king and then return. Before he left, he called together 10 of his servants and divided among them 10 pounds of silver, saying, invest this for me while I am gone. The King James says, occupy till I come. Occupy till I come. But his people hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, we do not want him to be our king. After he was crowned king, he returned and called in the servants to whom he had given the money. He wanted to find out what their profits were. The first servant reported, Master, I invested your money and made 10 times the original amount. Well done, the king exclaimed. You are a good servant. You have been faithful with the little I entrusted to you, so you will be governor of 10 cities as your reward. The next servant reported, Master, I invested your money and made 5 times the original amount. Well done, the king said. You will be governor over 5 cities. But the third servant brought back only the original amount of money and said, Master, I hid your money and kept it safe. I was afraid because you are a hard man to deal with, taking what isn't yours and harvesting crops you didn't plant. You wicked servant, the king roared. Your own words condemn you. If you knew that I'm a hard man who takes what isn't mine and harvests crops I didn't plant, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it. Then, turning to the others standing nearby, the king ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one who has 10 pounds. But master, they said, he already has 10 pounds. Yes, the king replied, and to those who use well what they are given, even more will be given. But from those who do nothing, even the little they have will be taken away. We all know this story. I mean, it talks about them being given money and all that, but we know it's about the gifts that God has given us. At the end of that, the very last verse says, those who use well what they are given, even more will be given. And for those who don't do anything with what they're given, even what they have will be taken away from them. If God has left us here and said, occupy till I come, do business until I come, take what I've given you and do business with it. Take the gifts I have given you, use them, and multiply them. How do we multiply them? By impacting people with those gifts. The kingdom of God is about multiplication, about fruit. If you're not producing fruit, then you're not using your gifts. If you're not multiplying, and when we use the word multiplying, I'm not talking about having babies, although you're welcome to have babies. But when we're talking multiplying here, it's about impacting people, depositing the gift of God within you, depositing it into other people's lives. That's how you multiply. When Jesus said, go into all the world and preach the good news, that's what he means. Multiply, make disciples, put me inside other people. That's what he's saying. If you are not fruitful and you are not multiplying, I didn't say it. This says, even what you have will be taken away. I just read from the Bible, not me. But when you use the gifts God has given you, it is multiplied, topped up. You don't diminish. The people you deposit into grow in it. They grow in it. That is multiplication. Jesus said when he was talking about abiding in him, he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. He says, the branch that produces fruit, the Father prunes so it can produce even more. But the branch that doesn't gets cut off and thrown in the fire. That's Christians. It's not unbelievers. That branch is attached to the vine. It is getting nutrients from the vine, but it is not producing fruit. For you to produce more fruit, you have to produce fruit to begin with. We need to be a people who are fully everything God says we are. Fully everything God says we are. Bearing fruit. So, what are some of the things that stop us from occupying our space? What are the things, some of the things, not an exhaustive list, that stop us from being everything God says we are? Idleness, laziness. A lot of us Christians are lazy. We are very lazy people. We expect others to do the job on our behalf. When God says, all authority I have given unto you, go. We're still like, God, can you show me where I should, if you want me to go now, or maybe later, or no, he already said, I've given you all authority I have, go. But we're still waiting for another, I don't know what. I don't know if it's confirmation. Because how blunt can you be? Go! That's what he says. But we're still waiting for something else. For some reason, we hear somebody preach and say, oh, God has this and God has that for you. There's so much in God. You can be filled to the brim, filled to overflowing. Oh, yes. And we get all excited. Yes. But we're not willing to do the work. We expect for him to blow on us, and somehow we catch it. The things of God are not for the lazy. They are for those who are willing to pursue him and say, I will not go until you bless me. The things of God are for those who will run after him and say, I want everything that you have for me. The things of God are for those who will say, God, if you don't fill me up, I'm useless. Because you realize that you are. So let us be people who are not lazy or idle. Let us get up off our backsides and actually do some work. That work includes prayer. It includes sacrifice. It includes denying your flesh. Jesus said, if anybody wants to follow me, he has to deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. You take up your cross daily. Not that you took it up one time and that's it. No. Because your flesh doesn't go to sleep. You have to keep beating it until it falls to submission. Take up your cross daily and you follow him. Another thing that stops us from occupying is distractions. Some people start off really well. They're pursuing and pursuing, but somehow they start getting distracted by other things. They start, in some cases, start looking at other people's race. Other people's race isn't your race. Don't get distracted by somebody else's race. Run the race set before you. Fulfill your purpose. Encourage them in theirs, but fulfill yours. Don't start nitpicking on how they're not really doing their job properly and all of that. No. You do yours. Do yours. Fulfill your purpose. Let us read Numbers 13. When I was looking at this, the passage that God really gave me was in Numbers, it was about the children of Israel, after they've come out of Egypt, about them occupying the promised land, them entering into the promised land and occupying it. So we'll draw some similarities out of their story with ours. So this bit is, so the Israelites are now at the border of the promised land. Let me put it that way. They've arrived at the border after their wanderings. No, actually not after their wanderings. They haven't wandered yet. So this is about a year-ish after they've left Egypt. Yeah, I think it's about a year after they've left Egypt. Anyway, this is before they've started their wanderings. So they've arrived, they've left Egypt, they've gone through the Red Sea, they've eaten the manna and the quail and all of that, and now they've arrived at the border of the promised land. And I will start from Numbers 13:25. No, before I start. So they got to the border, and what Moses did was he chose 12 leaders, one from each tribe, and he sends them and says, go, and for 40 days, go and, scout out the land. Have a look. Come back with a report to us about what you see. Come and tell us how good the land is. Bring us some of the fruit. And that's similar to somebody's, to people saying, you know what, God has shown me how good the promised land is. It is a place where, we've got miracles, where we've got people getting saved every day, where we've got miracles happening, and And we're all like, yes, 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 that sounds good. But this is before they've brought back the report. So this is them bringing back the report, okay? So from verse 25. After exploring the land for 40 days, the men returned to Moses and Aaron and the whole community of Israel at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They reported to the whole community what they had seen and showed them the fruit they had taken from the land. This was their report to Moses. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it is indeed a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey. Here is the kind of fruit it produces. Now that should have been full stop. That should have just been it. We went there, we saw it, it is exactly as God said it is. It is a land flowing with milk and honey. It is bountiful. There are cities there. It is a wonderful place. We will do great in that land. But they continued. They said, but the people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We even saw great giants there, the descendants of Anak. The Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites and Jebusites and Amorites live in the hill country. The Canaanites live along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan Valley. Now, why do you start with, oh, it's a bountiful land and it flows with milk and honey, da, 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 da. Oh, it will be great. It's a good land. But we saw giants. And we are like that sometimes. And actually, a lot of the time. We are like that too. We're like, oh yes, it's the year of the harvest. Many people coming to know Jesus, the church being full. Oh, we being so busy in the Master's work. Oh, how great that is. And then you're like, oh, but sometimes when I talk to people, they don't hear, they don't want to know. But the community, but I'm only little, I can't really say anything. I never ever know what the right word is to say. Like, how do you even start? I'm talking to myself too, by the way. I'm not having a dig at you. It applies to me too. And we come up with all these but. Instead of stopping at, oh, it is indeed like God says. It is ripe unto a harvest. But we come up with all these but. It is time for us to stop saying but. It is time for us to stop the buts. And actually just say, yes, the land is how God said it is. But Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Let's go at once to take the land, he said. We can certainly conquer it. But the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. Oh, we can't go up against them. They are stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. This is the same people who said, it is a bountiful land, it is a good land, overflowing with milk and honey. Now they're like, oh, the land will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers, and that's what they thought too. Who first saw the grasshoppers? It was the people themselves who saw themselves as grasshoppers. It was only after they saw themselves as grasshoppers that the others thought of them that way. One of the things that stop us from occupying our space, from being who God says we are, is a false identity. If you don't know who you are and you see yourself a different way to how God sees you, if you see yourself any less than who God says you are, you will not occupy the land. When you see yourself as being less, then your problem, then the opposition sees you as less. You know, Jesus said all authority had been given unto him. And when he says go, he says go in that authority. That's what he's saying. But when I decide, oh, actually, I am less than one who has been authorized by Jesus, when I say, oh, actually, I'm going in just my own strength, oh, guess what? You may go, but you don't accomplish anything because you don't believe that you can. When you see yourself as being less than who you truly are, then everything you come against becomes a giant in your eyes. But when you stand up to your full stature in God, when you realize I am seated with him in the heavenly places, and when you realize that where he is seated far above. That's what the Bible says. He said Jesus Christ is seated on the right-hand side of the Father, seated far above principalities and powers. Anything you could ever mention in this age, Jesus is seated far above them. And you and I are seated with him. With him in the heavenly places. So when you realize that and you believe it and you live in that identity, nothing can stand against you. Nothing. Nothing can stand against you. The Bible says, if God be for us, who can be against us? Who can be against us? You know, we all sing, I am a child of God. But do we truly know what that means? Do we know what it means? If we live our lives as children of God, we are sons of the Father, we are heirs of the Father, heirs of the kingdom, co-heirs with Christ. When we realize that we are covenant partners with God, covenant partners. And what does a covenant do? It gives to me what belongs to him. Everything that he has is mine. But at the same time, everything I have is his. My very life is his. We need to know our true identity. We need to know who we are. And when we know who we are, we will do great things. Another thing that stops us from fully occupying our space is fear. The same people who said, it's a bountiful land, all of a sudden were like, the land's going to devour us. Because they were fearful. Fear makes you see things that are not there. It gives you a totally wrong perspective. Fear paralyzes you. It stops you. Worry does the same thing. It paralyzes you. It stops you from actually doing anything about your situation. But we need to be people of faith. Faith. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. At the same time, without faith, it is impossible to have any impact whatsoever. Because you have to believe that God has given you the power to accomplish what he has called you to accomplish. But if you don't believe it, you can't do anything. You can't do anything. Fear is a terrible thing. So these guys came back with the report, oh, we saw giants, the sons of Anak lived there, and then they start saying where all the other people live. But if you go to Joshua chapter 6, verse 1, now this is after they've done their 40 years in the wilderness and have come back to the border of the promised land. We get to Joshua chapter 6, verse 1, and it says that Jericho was tightly shut for fear of the Israelites. Can you imagine that? So these guys have gone to spy out the land, and they came back fearful. Yeah? But after they've now gone around on their wanderings, and this new generation of Israelites know who they are, guess what? The enemy is scared of them. They haven't even entered yet, but the enemy is scared of them. They've tightly shut the place up because they don't want the Israelites to come in. Remember, the first time around, when they were at that same border, all the nations around about had heard about them because they heard about what God had done to Egypt. It was still very fresh in the memory. How God killed all the firstborn of Egypt. How God opened up the Red Sea in front of them. That was still very fresh in the memory of the people. So imagine how scared those people must have been. You've been in a place, you've gone walkabouts in a place to spy it out for 40 days. Nobody harassed you. 12 of you. You've been in their land, spying it out for 40 days. Not just a couple of days. 40 days. Nobody harassed you. Nobody fought you. And yet you come back afraid. Why? And now this time around, they haven't even gone in yet. And the enemy is shutting. They have to shut everything. Shut it all down. Don't let anybody in. Don't let anybody out. And after they've been on their campaign, when you get to Joshua 11, verse 21, it says that, Tim, can you please bring it up? Joshua 11:21. I want everybody to see it. It's not me. So remember, the spies said, oh, we saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Yeah? When we get to Joshua 11:21, it says, at that time Joshua went and destroyed the Anakites. These are the same giants the Israelites saw. So do you get it? Fear makes you see things as impossible when they are actually very possible. Very possible. Further on, it says that this was just one campaign. It wasn't that he kept going and coming back, kept going and coming back. He destroyed all of those ites, this ite and that ite, in one single campaign. One single campaign. One single campaign. He destroyed the Anakites completely. The very same people that the Israelites were like, oh, they're giants. When you know who you are, when you walk in faith, even the impossible becomes possible. It becomes possible. Another thing that stops us from fully occupying our space is murmurings and grumblings and complainings and rebellion. So back in Numbers, after the spies came back with their report, and they said, oh no, the land will devour us if we go in. The people rebelled. They started murmuring and grumbling and were like, why have you brought us here to kill us in the wilderness? Why are you letting our children be carried off as captives? Why this and why that and why that and why that? And still start whining and complaining. It would have been better off if we were back in Egypt. Let's anoint a new leader and take us back to Egypt. That's what they were saying. And remember, it was God who brought them out in the first place. But they were like, it is too much, we want to go back. How often do you look at your life and be like, oh God, oh how I wish I was back to you, whenever it was that you look back to. When you're going through problems, how often are you like, oh God, oh last year was better. You face a challenge, and you're like, oh, how I wish I could go back. But no. If you truly believe that the steps of the righteous are ordered by God, then where you found yourself, God ordered you there. And if He ordered you there, why are you hankering for last year? Let us be people who realize that God has brought us somewhere for a reason. He brought the Israelites to the border of the land because He wanted to give them that land. They went, they saw, and instead of going to conquer, they turned their back. That stops. It stopped them from entering the land. And God actually saw that all that generation would not see the promised land. And the children that they were scared that the enemy would take away and capture and all that, God said, those very same children will enter, not you. Let us be people who listen to God, who listen to Him and not rebel against Him. Rebellion gets you nowhere. No, it gets you somewhere. Just not where you're meant to be. It gets you very far away from where you're meant to be. Another thing that stops people from entering their promised land or from becoming everything God has called them to be is human wisdom and human strategies. Relying on human wisdom and human strategies. Your wisdom is not as wise as God's foolishness. Shall I repeat that? Your wisdom is not even close to God's foolishness. So when God tells you to do something and it sounds foolish, your wisdom is nothing compared to that. You better follow God's foolishness than start relying on your own wisdom. Because your wisdom will not get you very far. So after they've all rebelled, and God said what God said, and the 10 spies who gave the bad report had all been killed, the rest of the people were now scared. They were like, okay, we know we've sinned. we know we've sinned, we repent of our sin. Now we're ready to enter the land. But God already said, no, you're not going in. Like, we're now ready to enter the land. Let's go. And Moses is like, no, you can't go now. God has said you won't see the land. You can't go. They're like, oh no, you should read Numbers 13. Honestly, you guys should read it. We've moved on from 13, now we're in Numbers 14. And they were like, no, we will go. So they went. They went up to Canaan, and guess what? They left Moses behind. They left the ark behind. And the ark symbolizes God's presence. Yeah? So they left God behind, left Moses behind, and decided we are going to go in our own strength. We're going to go with our own strategy, in our own wisdom, and we will go and take the land. And guess what? They got trashed. The enemy sent them packing. They failed because they were going with their own strength and wisdom and strategy. If you look at Joshua 6, however, God says, so they've come back to Joshua 6 now. They're at the border of the land, and Joshua also sent spies, and the spies went, and they came back with a report. Oh, and this time around, the enemy actually knew the spies were in the land, even though there were only 2 of them. Do you see that? 2 people had a bigger impact than 12 because they knew who they were. So they've gone in, so now they are at the border again, ready to take the land. And God says, oh, and remember Jericho was tightly shut. Now, the strategy you would use in those days was, if you come to a fortified city that's been shut against you, what do? You lay siege to it. You camp around it, and basically all you're trying to do is suffocate it. So you wait until they run out of resources. Then they will have to open up their gates. But God said, we're not camping here for months. I want you to go around the city for 7 days. God gives them the strategy. Now, that strategy doesn't make sense. All you have to do is get some people to blow a horn and just march around the city for 7 days. Don't do anything. There's actually, I was reading, there was a bit there where Joshua said, don't even say a word. How's that meant to do anything? Be quiet and just march. And then on the 7th day, we're going to shout. What's a shout going to do? But, again, God's foolishness is wiser than man's wisdom. And on the 7th day, they shouted, and guess what? The walls came down, and they marched in, and they took the city. That is God's wisdom, God's strategy, contrasted against human wisdom. But they also went in, and when God said, don't take anything for yourself, one person decided, I want some of that. Disobedience. That's another thing that stops us. Disobedience. When God says something and we decide, oh, I'm going to go against that, it stops you from getting what God has for you. Disobedience. So, in Joshua 7, you read about how they then go and face an army that they should have defeated very easily. But that army defeated them because of their disobedience. One person disobeyed. And one person's disobedience cost the whole country. I mean, that guy didn't lose his life when they went fighting, but there were others who lost their life because of his disobedience. Your disobedience doesn't only affect you, it has an impact on others too. So we need to be people who obey God. If God says something, obey him. Easy way to live. But when they put things right, they went and faced that same army again and defeated it, and then continued on that campaign. That destroyed everybody else. But when you read through Joshua, you'll find that each time, apart from this time where there had been disobedience, each time they went up against another army, another city, he listened to God's strategy for that time. And God said, and God said, and God said. Yeah? The other thing that I've got down that stops us from fulfilling or occupying our space and becoming everything God says we ought to be is listening to the wrong voice. When we listen to the wrong voice, when you go to Deuteronomy chapter 1, you come to an address that Moses gives to the whole community. This is when they're now back at the border before Moses died. And he talks them through their journey. He remembers what happened back in Numbers 13. And if you go to Deuteronomy 1:19, you'll see that first time when they went around, when they got to that border and Moses sent the spies in, actually what God had said to Moses was, you see that land? I have given it to you. Go and take it. That's what God had said. That land is yours. Go and take it. Oh no. Can we go back to verse 19? Okay, no, verse 20. It's fine. So, Moses said, then I said to you, you have reached the hill country of the Amorites, which the Lord our God is giving us. See, the Lord your God has given you the land. Go up and take possession of it as the Lord, the God of your fathers, told you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. 22. Then all of you came to me and said, let us send men ahead to spy out the land. God said, go up and take the land. But the people said, can we send spies first, please? And Moses, instead of listening to what God had said, listened to the voice of the people and sent spies. And those spies came with a bad report. Now, if he had not sent those spies, their journey would have been over. But because he listened to the wrong voice, they went wandering around in the desert for 40 years. I don't want to go wandering for 40 years. 40 years now be, too old. A wrong voice can set you back many years. Many years, many losses. That's what the wrong voice does. So we need to be a people who listen to the right voice. If God has said something to you, and then you have others adding their own 2 pence worth, discount it. Listen to the one who has spoken to you and obey him. listen and obey him. So as we go forwards into this year, let us be people who listen to God and obey him. When he directs us, we hear him and obey him. We do not fear. We're not lazy. We don't see ourselves any different to how he sees us. We take our identity from him. But actually, for you to be able to do that, you have to know him. So I'm going to remind you of some of the things that God gave me for the church. He said, be bold, be courageous, for I have called you and appointed you for this time. I am with you. I am your God. I go before you and I stand behind you. I surround you. You are in me and I am in you. I will lead you by my right hand. Let us listen, follow, and obey him. He says, be bold, be courageous, have no fear, for I am with you. I will go before you, and I will accomplish my word. What has he said to you? He says, I will go before you, and I will accomplish it. I will go before you, and I will accomplish it. So let us remember him. Let us remember that he who has promised us, he is faithful. He is faithful. He is faithful. Let us remember that he is the one who causes us to walk with our heads held high. Not cowed by fear, not cowed by circumstances, but he causes us to walk tall, bold. And let us be people who can say with David, in your strength, Lord, I can crush an army. With my God, I can scale any wall. Any wall, any challenge, any problem, any enemy, any opposition, I can scale it. Any obstacle in my way, it will become a stepping stone for me to reach where God wants me to get to. Nothing will stop me from being and receiving everything that God has for me. Nothing. No one. I will fear no evil because he is with me. Yes. So that's God's word for you. You respond how you want to him.